Hey, welcome to the Runaways podcast. My name is Cody, and today we're going to be talking about the calling Hartford that just happened, and we're going to talk about that judge call that happened in the finals and what really happened with that. But today, I am joined with a bunch of people from the Runaways who all did extremely well at Hartford calling. We had Pat, who was right there at his winning in. Unfortunately, wasn't able to make it in top 8. And then we also have James. James, unfortunately, him and I had to face each other a round before the winning in, which we both knew our decks were good enough that whoever won that game was probably winning the next game and making it in as well. And then everyone knows we had Yuanji, who went undefeated on day 1. And then day 2 went in as first seed into the top 8 and then got train wrecked and drafted, unfortunately. Which is not really his fault. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit if he wants to as well. But Pat, I'll start with you. I know we had a heartbreak on that winning in, but how are you feeling a couple days removed?
Oh, it was, overall I had a great time at the tournament. For how scuffed my sealed pool was, I am even happy to have made day 2. I posted it on Twitter. I had just like actual no equipment that did anything for 90% of my matchups. I was playing 3 stadium pieces into almost everybody, which is you need to have a little bit better. I think that in sealed, but we scrimped and managed to make our way in, and then drafted Kayo twice, both 2-1. The last match against Mark, I I can't really say that I was unlucky because I went second, and he had a turn where he just discarded his blue onto a Bear Fangs and just passed. Things went good for me in the game, and his deck still was able to overcome. So he did have better armor than me, which again is a big deal. But I can't say how much I love this format for both sealed and for draft. I'm really excited to keep playing in the future, and I think that those of us who put the time in it'll pay off for LA for sure.
So, Pat, what you're telling me is it's your fault I lost the mark.
Yes, it is
because
100% your fault.
You didn't.
My fault. But I was hoping that you would be able to avenge me, and you were unable to avenge me. So, but
you didn't protect the sanctity of the top 8.
Well,
you let Mark in.
Here's the thing, though. So I thought about this a little bit actually later on. I would have been in Mark's seat, and so I would have drafted Mark's deck, and I would have, won the tournament then. Right?
Yes.
Because I would have got the knucklehead open, whatever.
Yep.
So
no, I opened the knucklehead, and it passed through like 4 people to get to him. It was ridiculous. 3 people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was that in pack 1 or in pack 3 or something?
It was pack 2, I believe.
Pack 2?
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
And James, you and I had to play the round before. You were at the top pretty much the entire tournament. And unfortunately, we had so many Runaways people. We had it was a problem. We had so many Runaways people live for top 8 that we ended up having 3 members in multiple pods right next to each other. And so it was just like, well, only one of us is getting out of, each of these pods more than likely. I think it was like going into the final draft, we had 7 people live for top 8. Yeah, which is insane. So unfortunately, it was you, me, and Naib in that pod. You and I ended up facing in the second to last round, and then I faced Naib after that. You had a pretty interesting take on it. You don't have to go into that, but how overall did you feel about your tournament?
So overall, I felt pretty good. I'm quite sad I didn't top, but I knew that I was probably going to day 2. I felt like I figured something out about the sealed format that no one else did, and it was pretty obvious that I believe that it's actually a fatigue format unless you open up a really good pool, but most pools are not very good. And I went 7-1 day 1 on Kayo with a pretty bad Kayo pool. My armor was okay, but I had 4 wild rides and no Bear Fangs, and my block through ratio was pretty bad. And I ended up fatiguing almost every single person I played day 1, and no one expected it. I got some really quality players in there, and a lot of the games I had to pit stack my win, but whatever, I can do that. And then Day 2, I was in Yuanji's draft on the first pod, and we were in the undefeated slash X1 bracket. I ended up going 1-2 that pod, um, but I felt that my deck was much better than that. I ended up playing like a Victor style deck, but I was in a triple Victor pod. And then the second pod, I was in your pod, and I felt like I drafted like one of the best Victor decks I could possibly draft, and then you just had the counter to it, and you had a better deck somehow. And I'm like, I don't understand how this is possible. I felt like pretty confident in everything, but I also used day 2 as like a testing ground for like the Pro Tour, I think. And I probably just would have been better off just forcing Kayo or Kasai, and I probably would have done better. But I don't know. Besides the tournament, I just had a blast. I knew a ton of people at Hartford between the Magic, Lorcana, and Fab events, and I was overwhelmed. So if you didn't get to say hi to me or talk to me this weekend, I'm sorry. I couldn't make it from one end to the venue to the other without being bombarded with people asking me how I was doing. So thank you all. I appreciate all the support.
In Yuanji, you had just obviously a cakewalk through day 1, going 8-0, just showing up everybody on the stream. And then the second day, you just, again, cakewalk through everybody because you're Yuanji and it's just easy for you. And then someone got mad at you, I think, in top 8 and decided to train wreck you. So that's the story that I like. But how actually did you feel your tournament went?
So I think for day 1, when I opened my sealed pool, I thought that it was pretty good. I actually had a hard time deciding between playing Kayo or playing, I think I was going to play maybe Victor. And it was because if I played Guardian, I would have full equipment, but if I played Kayo, then I would be missing, I didn't have a chest piece, and my hat wasn't that great. Ultimately, I decided that I like the KO cards that I had were all like pretty good. I had what is it called? The Cast Bones, which I got to. I was pretty lucky. I drew it on turn 0 a lot of times over the weekend. It was never really like for anything more than like 2 or 3 might tokens, but it's good enough. And I also had like 3 agile windups, which I think is like one of KO's best cards. I mean, like other than that, the seal pull was like nothing like too crazy. It was just like a bunch of red attacks, like not enough blues, but like enough if I dipped into some crappy generics. I blocked very little and won a lot of my games at 1 life.
Yeah, every time I walked by, you were like, they had like a little TV set up, and you're like on stream, and every time I walk by, you're both just at 1, but you have full momentum, and I was like, you have it. I don't have to sit here and watch anymore. Great. I think my pool was pretty good on my sealed. I was pretty happy with it. However, I had no 2-block armor, and basically both my losses were pretty much because of that. Like I just was missing armor, but the actual deck I played, Kasai, was actually good. So I had no complaints after I opened it up. Had enough blocks, had enough blues, had enough 3 blocks. It was all good enough. I managed to squeak out X2 on day 1. I actually went 2-2 at the first 4 games, and just kind of had to win almost every game after that in order to have a chance. Those 2 losses felt like pretty variance to me, and it was mainly because I just didn't have the armor. Like I couldn't pivot swing like my opponents could when they had 2-block armor, and I just kind of fell behind. Other than that, it just did efficient warrior stuff. You guys could see it on stream. I played my winning in on stream into a KO there as well. Got pretty fortunate that he missed his wild ride as well, so that might have squeaked me in. But he ended up making it into day 2 as well, so it might have not even been a real winning in match for him. The drafts went great. I went warrior again and then warrior again because it just kind of seemed open. And my last pod, I think I felt like I was the only warrior. I know we had another one, but I was basically solo warrior, and that deck was probably the best deck I've ever drafted. And it just it was like aggro. Like normally on warrior, you're like blocking and you're like behind and you're trying to play efficient. And that deck was just like, no, I am the aggro deck. 3 for 7s with pumps on top of it. I had like 7 red pumps. I had like 4 or 5 3 for 7s. It was just super aggro. I just like took the pace at the beginning of the game and just never let it up at all 3 games. And I was like, this deck shouldn't exist. I don't know what happened.
I think I know what happened.
I was the only warrior.
Well, you were Olympia in those ones, weren't you?
I was Olympia in those because I had the helmet.
Yeah.
Talk about the difference. Like, how much better is 3 armor versus Olympia versus Kasai's ability?
It's actually pretty close, I think.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
But the armor just allows you to hold more cards in your hand, and cards are worth more than your weapons swinging for 3. Or swinging for free. So you only need your weapons to swing for free when you don't have cards. So if you could just keep cards, then it doesn't matter if you're paying for your weapons. And also it allowed me to keep more hands that were like 3 for 7s with a pump behind it, which is just devastating. And you can't do that when you don't have the armor to like protect your health. So it was basically like I drafted in both of those. I just drafted Kasai decks that I happened to just get an Olympia helm real late and went, I guess I'm Olympia now. Okay. So they were complete like Kasai decks with yellows and everything else like ready to go. But the helmet's just good enough. That 3 block is just like, okay, I'll switch. To be fair. We'll talk a little bit deeper about that, but I did want to cut over to at least talk about the Battle Hardened before we dig more into the calling. The Battle Hardened was won by Yuki. Yuki has been on a tear. She had a great year last year, and she was able to continue it this year. She's just like, she had some murmurings like 2 years ago, and then she just kept winning and topping everything last year, and it's pretty cool that that's continued. She ended up bringing Kayo, which I think was a fantastic choice for this tournament. One, because most people's Kayo's decks suck. We play against them online all the time, and they just like all the KO decks are just pathetic. Hers was well refined. She had all the cards. Probably most people didn't have the correct helmet to get some advantage against her. The balance helmet to draw. So you get like an little extra edge there in all the matchups that are kind of close. And I think overall it was a very smart decision to bring KO. And we've been playing with the deck a little bit, obviously with changes or things like that, and it's powerful. It's a strong deck. I mean, what do we think about the new KO deck?
I can start. I think KO honestly kind of reminds me a little bit of Fi.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Obviously, they attack differently. KO has like singular large attacks most of the time. Fi, you're attacking pretty wide. But the reason why Fi was really good in the past is because you have a go again weapon that for 3 that costs 2, and then your hero power lets you snag like an extra point of damage. Does this sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think both of them plays kind of similarly, where you're kind of leveraging the fact that your hero power just gives you like an extra point of value every time you can activate it, and so you kind of want to try to activate your hero power as many times as possible, and then you'll just end up outputting more numbers than your opponent.
Yeah, the hero power comparison is a good thing that I hadn't thought of. But the one thing that you're definitely much better than Fi is blocking, right? Like you're just such a better blocking deck than Fi ever was, and your armor is just miles better. Well, I don't know, miles better, but like Bonebreaker and Scab Skins and Scowling Fleshbag,
Yeah,
miles.
you
Literally miles.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, Mask of Momentum, Massive Pouncing Links, like these cards are good too, but I don't think they compare to the power that Brute equipment are.
I think you have better armor, but you actually do run into some issues blocking because a lot of your cards block for nothing or they block for 2.
Yeah,
similar to Fi, but yeah, you definitely have much better armor on average, and then also you kind of lose less when you block down compared to Fi, where Fi when you block down to 2 cards, you're kind of doing like a 2-card 7, whereas when KO blocks down to 2 cards, it does like a 2-card like 9. Which is kind of ridiculous.
Or sometimes 11.
Yeah.
Sometimes 11.
Also, Kayo has a better 1-card hand than Fi does as well with, Cast Bones.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cast Bones is a messed up card.
Yep. I think we all realized that when we saw it, that card is busted.
It kind of reminds me a little bit of Awakening in like
No.
balanced. Like, no, it's not bannable, but it like when I first read it, I was like, it's giving me a little tingly feeling inside.
Nothing will compare to Awakening.
No.
But
I do understand what you're saying. It does carry
I get what
value
you're
over.
saying, though. Yeah. It certainly screamed powerful for sure. But
okay, in the rest of the Battle Hardened, we had a second KO, we had 2 Bravos, we had a Kano, we had a Dash, a Kasai, we had 1 Levia, and I'll give a little shout out to William there. He's actually a local, goes to my local store. That was his first top 8, so that was pretty cool to see on Levia, which him and I have talked about a little bit, and I brought it to the store I think like a couple months ago, and he's been talking about it before ever since, and he opens like an Apex Bone Breaker at our pre-release, and he's like, it's meant to be. I'm playing Levia, and it's
so cool.
and it's pretty cool to see that he took it to the Battle Hardened and was able to get his first top there. So I thought that was pretty sweet. Unfortunately, he had to in round 1 run into Yuki on KO, and that's a pretty hard matchup. So yeah, hey, welcome to the big leagues. Boom.
It's really cool to hear they got the top 8 with the first top 8.
Yeah, I would also like to shout out my friend Pierre. Also, I believe his first top 8. He was the Kasai, and he's one of my locals. So I was like, "Oh, my boy."
Yeah.
What do we think of this top? I mean, this seems pretty expected, right? Like, they're none of these heroes really surprised me that they got a top here.
Yeah, I think when we did the review before the Battle Hardened, I think the only big question mark was, are the KO decks going to be good enough? Because I think we said that KO seems like he presents like a lot of numbers, but it's just like whether or not you can consistently output whether you're oppressive or whether you're just like pretty good. And all it takes is like 1 or 2 points, 1 or 2 points a turn, a difference, and you can go from being just like kind of like an average, pretty good deck into a deck that's like a bit oppressive. And I think that Yuki is kind of onto something with a lot of the cards that she chose to play. And so I think that for me was a little bit surprising that Kayo's kind of getting figured out so quickly, but then all the other heroes I think are pretty much to be expected.
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised with the heroes that we saw. I guess I was more surprised to see who was left off with no Dromais in top. It was
Surprising.
the most represented deck in the field. I would at least expect to see one make it through.
No.
I don't know. I know that Fino
C tier.
and to some extent, Jimmy and I mean, we all played it at Barcelona. I do think the deck is still really good.
Nope.
It's,
Don't lie to the people.
It's a different format.
I'm not lying. I promise you, I'm not lying. I think Dromai is still a very powerful deck, and it does things that no other deck can do. And it certainly has some powerful. So I don't know. I like to say that I was surprised to see 0 Dromais in top 8.
I wasn't. Fino didn't even play Dromai at the Battle Hardened. He played Kasai.
Fino was experimenting.
Yeah, I think Dromai. It's kind of tough because when we're preparing for the last when we're preparing for Worlds, I think you can make the argument that was like a much more favorable meta for Dromai, where you have like Icelander as like one of the most popular decks, and Dromai has a lot of good tools into Icelander or like other arcane damage heroes, right? And now we're in the format where a lot of the top decks just have like tons and tons of 6 power attacks. So yep. Not really where I want to be.
I don't know. It just makes me think of that Illusionist are in a bad spot, and it was reminding me that just I don't know, like an hour ago, you were playing against a Prism, and like as KO, and you ended the game at 40 health, the prism just did no damage. Every round they swung 2 attacks at you, and you're just like, no, move on with my life. Like, I'm just gonna swing my weapon at you until you die. Essentially, you start at 32, so you've already taken 2 claws to the face. Like, what? How do you even play the game? But obviously, Dromai is not in nearly as bad of a spot as that. But it's just that I think the new heroes make her matchups harder. She's falling into like 2 issues. Like, one, there's a bunch of new cards that are pretty good. There are still classes that like really struggle with her. Like Warrior can naturally struggle to play into her, but a lot of the matchups that were close, people are used to playing against Dromai now. So like you're not getting as many free wins from your opponents just like punting the game into you, because they have like a year and a half of experience of playing against Dromai at tournaments over and over again. We saw this with Icelander. Like Icelander's like percentage wins started to creep like closer to where they probably should be as people got more comfortable playing against an Icelander deck, knowing exactly the ranges were, and people like stopped just like holding a card for 2 rounds because they were afraid of dying out of nowhere. You know, they people have stopped giving Dromai all their free wins. So I think what we're seeing is that some of her win rates are starting to go where they were originally supposed to be if you played properly, because like the general public is now starting to play properly. And so it's a lot harder to just pilot Dromai when you have so many, close matchups.
I can buy that.
I also think that the new headpiece balance is also somewhat of a nerf to Dromai. Just any deck that wants to draw extra cards. Now, I don't know how applicable that was for the Battle Hardening, because a lot of people didn't have it yet, but that definitely has to be mentioned, that's just a big nerf for her.
Sure, another chance to get a popper. It's great. On her big turn, she codexes, and you're like, thank you. Let me see if I can get a popper here. Okay, so I thought the Battle Hardened top 8 was pretty expected. It was pretty cool overall, and I know that those games are slowly being rolled out through this whole week to end on Friday, so definitely pay attention to Savage Feats for that. Now, I do want to jump back over to the calling, and I'm going to, I think, probably talk about the next section pretty tactfully as I can. And I want to start off by just talking about the overall judging of the event that we went there. And obviously, I have a lot of respect for the judges. A lot of my friends are actually, are judges or people that I've played with. And it's a pretty much a thankless job. But I will say, at this calling, they were trying to train probably too many people at once. And the understanding that the general judges had of how the game was supposed to be played and what they were supposed to do, I felt like was way lower than we've seen at almost all the events for the last year and a half. Many times, like, the judges had to really like look up simple rulings, or they just ruled like it was a casual event instead of a fully enforced professional level event. And I understand you have to train new people, but this felt like a lot. I don't know if anyone else had very similar experiences that around them throughout the tournament.
I didn't have any judge calls that I can remember, but I mean, I just anecdotally, you hear things, and I know we had some wild things happen during this tournament, including in the finals, and people being removed from the tournament, things like that. So I empathize with any side of decision where that has to happen. So
yeah, I don't know. I think for me, I didn't have to make that many judge calls. The one judge call that I had to ask, it was a more experienced judge that was handling it, and everything went kind of smoothly. I think that the main thing that I saw overall was just that sometimes it was like a little bit difficult to get judges, because I think I don't know if they're like shadowing or what, but sometimes you would like ask for a judge and it would be slow, or like they would, like, you would have to like go through like appeal. I know that there was like this one match that was going on that like took forever. I think there was like some stuff that they were handling, and normally I think it would have been done faster, but maybe just because they're going through the process of training ended up being slower.
Their in the calling, there's only one match that went really long, and that was due to that disqualification. And I don't think that one had to do anything with the new judges.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would agree.
I made a lot of judge calls through the tournament, a lot of them on myself, or if like my opponent ever didn't like understand an interaction, I'd be like, whatever, judge. And Cody and I will talk about this a lot, that we are usually the first to call judges on ourselves, not our opponents. It's like really rare that happens, that someone calls it on me. And almost every judge call I made, I already knew the answer. I was just like showing my opponent, don't trust your opponent. And almost every one of mine just went fine. So, but I saw a lot of judge calls that I was like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, to be fair, to reiterate, I had the judge called on me 0 times the entire tournament. I had a judge called in my games 3 times, I think, the entire tournament. 2 of those times are on stream, so people can watch those. But I will say it was like me watching like like games around me. Someone would call a judge, and then like the judge doesn't know how Wild Ride works. Is like kind of weird. At like a professional level event, like I understand like a battle hardened or something, like not a big deal. But it was like they had to go look up how that worked, and then I just felt bad for Amanda because Amanda's just like getting referenced like over and over and over again from all the judges, having to, because she did a great job. I have like no really super complaints about her at the tournament or anything, and it's not really a complaint about the judge program. It's just like maybe have a couple more established people on there, because I think it felt like they were ruling it like a casual event for most things, and then and other issues they were ruling it completely differently. So there wasn't a level of consistency across rulings. Like sometimes they would just fix the game state, and there would be like no penalty, and they just walk away. And then other times people get disqualified. So it's like you had a wide difference there. I will dig in to the actual judge call in the finals of the game, because I've thought about it a lot, and I want to preference this a couple of ways that are very important. One, I'm not saying at all that the judge call is the reason I lost that game. I've watched that game 3 times. I can't find mistakes. I think I played that game at a near perfect level. I would very much welcome if people could point out mistakes I made in that game. I felt like I got a little unlucky in the finals, to be fair. There were about 3 hands that if I had drawn a blue, I'd probably win the game off that hand, and I just could not find my blues to save my life, even though I had 10 of them in the deck, which is like a bit of a problem. But I just felt like I got unlucky in that game, and that happens. I mean, that's top 8s. Like you gotta, it takes some run good and good play to get to the top 8, but it takes luck to win a top 8, because you only got one shot. It doesn't matter, how favored or what position you're in. Look at the first game. Like, look at my top 4 match. Like, I thought I'd lost the game after turn 1. Like, I opened 4 reds. I pitched 3 reds, play a draw swords, swing, draw a blue that I can't arsenal, and swing for 5. And my opponent's just like, yeah, I'll just block with this card. And I'm just like, no arsenal, go to you. Like, I was like, I'm gonna do my best, but I'm pretty sure I lost this game. He had a couple stumbles that let me come back into it, and I was just like, ooh. It was like I got unlucky, and they got lucky again in that one game, and that's just kind of how top 8s work, right? But to talk about the actual judge ruling in the top 8, or in my finals game, my opponent Mark, and again I want to preference this. This is nothing against Mark. I think Mark just made a mistake. It's like not a big deal. Like I have no ill will or anything towards Mark, so I don't want anyone who listens to this to take it that way, right? We've all made mistakes, playing the game, so it's not a big deal. And so mine is more of, I think, policy around how they handle the rule. And that's what we're going to pretty much talk about. So my opponent picked up his deck and dealt 5 cards instead of 4 cards. He had not looked at them yet. They were laying in a pile. Because he did this every single time. He would play his cards, but he would wait to see what I did before looking at his cards. That was just his play pattern every single turn. He didn't pick up and look at his cards right away, which is completely fine. I do that sometimes as well. I just deal my cards off and then wait and then look at it later. And so he dealt 5, didn't realize it. He had them just kind of stacked into a pile. I finally made my decision, my turn. And then he went to pick up his cards to look at them, and the judge came over and stopped him. However, it had flashed the bottom card. So it would have been the first card dealt. It did flash that card. They were able to review that. It flashed that card. They put it back down. They counted out over the top. They said, "Oh, you have 5, not 4." And then the judge started to make a ruling, and then Amanda came in to look at everything. And ultimately, after looking at the footage, the ruling that they decided was that they were going to show me the card that was flashed, which was the first card dealt. So it's not the card that he shouldn't have drawn, right? It's not the card that should be on the top of the deck. It is the card that was flashed. They reveal it to me and ask me to put it on the top or the bottom. And at the time, I didn't consider the full ramifications of the issue. It's pretty late. I'm tired. And I'm on stream on the finals. Like, I'm just trying to get through the game and play the game, right? I should have probably slowed down and thought about the situation a little bit more and advocated for myself a little bit better in that situation, but I'll explain why. So he's showing me the first card that he drew. This card should never have been on the top of the deck because it wouldn't have been in the situation. Had he just drawn 4 cards, that would not have been the card on the top of the deck, right? But it is the one that he saw, so that's one they're going to show to me. I didn't consider how it's possible that the last card that he drew, the one that was supposed to be on the top of the deck, could improve his hand. So it's possible that the card that he accidentally drew could improve his hand if we follow the method of just showing the card that he flashed and not the actual card that should be on the top of the deck. The chances of that are 25%. If you want to know what his hand was, it was 2 yellows, which is not relevant what they are. It's just 2 yellows. It's a 2 for 6. It's a 1 for 3 pump, and it's a blue. So if the card that was supposed to be on the top of the deck is a blue, it dramatically improves his hand. Instead of having 2 yellows, a 1 for 3 pump, and then a red 2 for 6, which is very hard to play. He has to block, take 1 more damage. He still swings for the same amount of damage. However, he takes 1 point down, and he doesn't have that card on top of his deck, right? So it does improve his hand. Even if his hand was something else, there's always a chance that last card could have improved his hand. So my actual complaint, and more than likely it had no bearing on the outcome. I've looked through it, a bunch of times. More than likely, even if it was the blue, it had no real outcome on the end of the game. But the way that they did make that ruling, they made it in a way where my opponent could have made a mistake and then had a better hand for making the mistake. And no rulings should ever have any chance of that happening. In this case, knowing full information, the chance was 25%. But that chance should always be 0%. So whatever the fix or the rule is, or the punishment, however you want to think about it, it should have a 0% chance that my opponent gets an advantage out of making a mistake. And that's my real complaint about the whole situation, is that the way they ruled it at the table not only gave my opponent knowledge of what was on top of the deck, put the onus on me to make a decision with incomplete information, but then possibly improved my opponent's hand by letting him keep the extra card that they drew as well. I am curious if some people have some additional thoughts, and I can talk about it, a little bit more. But that's my real complaint about this, is I think it should be looked at in a way where they need to refine the ruling down so it has a 0% chance of my opponent actually getting an advantage for making a mistake.
I know that Yuanji, you had a brief conversation with Amanda after the incident happened, but I wasn't part of that. But my understanding was that looking at additional cards penalty has always been that the additional card that is seen, if it was placed into the hand, that it is supposed to be to reveal the hand, the player chooses the card to place on top or bottom of the deck. That is the way that I always thought it was. Now, it's not as clear in this situation because he hadn't seen the entire hand, which I believe this is where the issue is with the rule, because it wasn't clear as to what happens in this particular situation. Because if you were to just knock a card off the top of your deck, that's the same thing. But in this situation, it's a little wonky because technically it entered his hand for a second. From what I saw on the coverage, I watched it at the airport while I had a very long delay layover. He picked up his hand, and then immediately the judge put his hand back down on the table. So he could have probably only seen the very first card. So
yeah,
it makes sense why they decided to make that ruling, in my opinion. But this is to me where the rules need to be probably clarified a bit. But
Yeah, I can fill in. Amanda did. I did. I asked Amanda the same question, and she had a response for me. So basically, the I believe that this is part of kind of a broader movement in how policy is applied in general. I think there was a change. It was either like half a year ago or maybe a little bit uh, later than that, where they changed the application of policy from being very like always standard to giving the judges a lot more leeway, or being able to apply like subjective like context. I think is was what they call it, so being able to apply context to how they enforce policy. So Amanda told me that the normally like the fix where you if somebody draws an extra card, and then they show their opponent the whole hand, that is supposed to be in the in like the case where the judges and the opponent can't actually verify like what is the order of the cards. So when I talked to Amanda about Cody's specific situation, she said, well, it was because they had the footage, so they knew that Mark hadn't seen anything other than the first card, uh, based off of like the camera angle that was showing his hand. And then they also, at the time, they thought that the card that was shown was the fifth card. So Amanda believed that this was the best way to most accurately uh, preserve the game state, and how to like apply the fix. I think that in the context of some of the cards that are in the heavy hitters, cards like Wild Ride, Bare Fangs, etc., that draw off the top of your deck, having information about the card that's on the top of your deck is advantageous. Even if it's just like left there. So I think that they probably need to revisit how this policy gets applied, or how how you adjust it. So I think it was kind of like a new use case, um, based off of like if we were playing Outsiders, unless you were playing like Azalea, like knowing the top of your deck doesn't like really help that much. So yeah, I think it was just it was like a new situation, and they tried to fix it as best they could.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same impression. At the time, they just showed me the card, and I had to make the decision of what on top about it. I have gotten asked why I put it on top, and just to answer the question is my opponent had a Wild Ride and a Bare Fangs in his hand almost every single round of the game, and if he had one in his hand this time around, if I put that card on top of the deck, then he has to discard it anyway in order to play it, because he can't not play a red card in his hand, because he has to give me a card either way. And so I figured it was worth that risk. And in a lot of cases, he hadn't had a brick hand either. So keeping another red on top, there's also a possibility he gets a red, on the second hand as well, like a all red hand or a low block hand, that's not playable. So I put it on top. I would have liked to not have to be in the situation to make a game defining possible decision with limited information because of a mistake that my opponent made. That feels kind of bad, to be honest, as like a fix. And I just, in the future, I should have spent a little bit more time to actually think about, hey, does this solution possibly benefit my opponent? Because I just don't think that is how it's supposed to be. I do understand they rule very lightly in stream games, on purpose to try and make sure that the games are completed and the games at least look have a simulation of how they would have felt without that mistake being made. And especially the finals, I understand they're going to try and be as lenient as possible. And I have no complaint about that. I'm not asking for them to have done, give me a win or something like that. And I don't think necessarily that was why I lost the game either. I think he was probably going to win the game irregardless of what was actually on top of the deck at that moment.
I mean, if they rule that you get to look at his 5-card hand and pick a card, it's a much different situation.
And I think that's why they didn't want to do that. They didn't want like a taint. And I honestly, I don't want to win that way either.
That you said that at the restaurant too, and I want to make sure that was brought up, like because you said specifically when we were at dinner that one of the reasons you put it on top too is because that's where it should have been, right? Like I don't know what your thought process is and now versus what it was then, because I know you were coming off a tough loss. But if you have anything to say on that.
I thought that originally the way they explained it was that was the card that was supposed to be on top of the deck, but it was not. It was the first card.
But at the time, that's what you thought it was.
At the time, that is what I thought it was. So it's supposed to be there. I can play it that way. But however, that's not what happened, and it is a 25% chance that him drawing the extra card improved the hand. After I went down, sat down, and looked through everything, and I went, I should have probably asked some more questions in that spot. But I was really just trying to get going with the game because I'm like, I want to know if I win or not. Like it's like a weird situation. Like it's very important to the outcome of the game, but if you're like sitting in that position, you're like, I just want to play and see what happens. Like I've been, I'm in this position. I just want to play the game. But in the future, I definitely need to probably spend a little bit more time just making sure that, irregardless of whatever the judge ruling is, that it isn't possibly giving my opponent an advantage for making a mistake. And that's the only point I actually care about. I think Mark played great the whole tournament. I know he ended up knocking you out as well. He obviously drafted his seat super well. There's no complaints there. And like I said, more likely than not, it didn't have any outcome on the game. It was just the ruling that I actually kind of had the issue with, like how that was handled at that time. But that should hopefully alleviate everyone's question that I have been getting constantly is, hey, what actually happened in that judge ruling?
Did you think of any way that the judge ruling could have been presented better?
If I had asked to verify that they thought that was the card that should be on the top of the deck, right? And it wasn't. The other way they could do it is show me the one that he saw and then show me the one that was supposed to be on top of the deck, and then I make a decision. There's also another way it could be done as well. More than likely, they didn't even need to show me the card that they revealed. They just needed to show me put it back on top of the deck if you hadn't seen it. Like that would have been the best solution, in my opinion, was like let him keep his original hand, and we should have verified which one was supposed to be on top of the deck. And I don't care that he saw a card that was supposed to be in his hand. Just take the extra card that he didn't see and put it on top of the deck. And then the game is in the state it should have been, right? And no one has an advantage either way, right? I think that would have just been a fine way to
I agree.
Anything else besides that is to discourage it from happening in the future. And they don't tend to do that on stream. They will do that off stream. So like if you make that mistake in a game not on stream, they will give you a punitive measure to make sure that you don't do it again. Like a reason not to do it again. They won't just fix the game state. But on stream, they will just fix the game state, which is how they have done it. They should probably make some streaming rules to make it a little easier on judges. But that's a whole different category. With that said, I think this format is amazing. And I do want to talk a little bit and give LSS a lot of props on this sealed format. I think is probably the best sealed format we've ever had, in my opinion. And I don't just mean that because I went 6-2. Like it was really hard. It's just like you can build multiple different decks and multiple different heroes can get there. And then your default hero isn't necessarily the best hero. And that's not how it's always been. A lot of times it was like Fi was just the default hero and probably the best hero at the same time. What do you guys think of this actual, we'll never play it again, but this actual sealed format?
I'll go last.
Okay.
I do think that this is one of the best formats for sealed they've ever had. Coming from like playing Tales of Aria and Outsiders and there's kind of just been the deck that has been the sealed deck to play. Whether it be always Briar or always Azuri or like all those type of things where it's just kind of just been like after playing in your pre-releases, everybody kind of figures it out, and it's just kind of these things. Heavy hitters, I don't think that's the case. Like I think that there are at least two very good heroes in Kasai and Kayo. These heroes are quite good, and it doesn't always come together, but like Betsy is still also very strong. I think that it's hard to put that pool together because it does require like a large number of blues to be viable, like because just most of her cards cost 3+. So that has an extra hurdle to tackle onto it. But like there were like Ellie went. I think she went X1 and only lost to Yuanji with Betsy that she had. Her sealed pool was very good as Betsy. Those games were all recorded. Well, at least some of those games were recorded on stream, so you guys can look at those for yourself and see how those pools look whenever you do get the good Betsy pool. So I think that LSS has done a great job making a well-rounded sealed pool and something that I think that they should try to replicate. And I think the big thing that pushes it this way is honestly the number of 2 blocks in the set. Like so, and it's funny because you would think that putting something that most people feel as 2 blocks are bad, which they are, but it actually kind of drives the game forward naturally themselves because whenever you have every card blocking for 3 or every card like wanting to block for 3, the games kind of drag on and you get these kind of fatigue games, and we don't have that very often. Even though Jimmy says that he thinks he can do it, I haven't seen it happen as much as he seems to think. But I have seen almost every game come down to I'm going to win the game on pure damage alone, or my opponent just blocks until they die.
I think the sealed format is better than all the other sealed formats that we've had so far. I think one thing that I use, because I'm coming to Flesh and Blood having played Magic sealed. I think one of the things that people either hate or love about Magic sealed is that a lot of how you decide to take your sealed deck is largely driven by like whatever rares you open, right? So you're just trying to play the most rares as possible. And I think that there's a lot of merits for that because it means that the game designers can create these like really powerful cards and kind of incentivize people to want to play with them. And I think that in heavy hitters there are definitely a lot of like really powerful cards. A lot of them are equipment as rares. So if you open like a hot streak, if you open like a rare helmet, it's like a pretty good signal for you to want to play that hero. And there's some other cards like if you open like a double down, a big bet, whatever, you know what I'm saying? And I feel like this kind of is a break from a lot of the other sets in the past where just being consistent was a lot more important, where you're just like playing your commons. And don't get me wrong, I think having some amount of consistency, low variance is part of the reason why a lot of people got into Flesh and Blood. But I think to make the seal format more interesting, more varied, and also just like more approachable for everyone, I think having these like really powerful cards is a good thing.
Agreed. I think 3 for 7s in the format, the amount of them there are, has really shaped the format of sealed positively. And I would like them to put more 3 for 7s in sealed pools because
3 for
make
7s
everything
block for 2.
Yes, that block for 2 made it a lot more interesting, I think. James, your thoughts?
So I'm going to start out saying I think sealed is just a bad format for pretty much every card game, and shouldn't be a competitive format. If we're talking about casually or like less competitive, I'm actually the more I played it, I actually really liked heavy hitters. Like it was like fine, but I think Bright Lights was probably one of the better sealed formats I've ever played for a casual standpoint. Not competitive. It was awful competitive. But the fact that you could take any 3 or 4 packs and put them together and kind of learn the game through that and not have like class or anything and be able to play 100% of your cards, I thought that was really interesting. But then
Jimmy just wants to count to 3 Evos.
Yeah, exactly. But then competitively, Bright Lights was the worst format we've ever had. So, whatever.
How many keywords did you have to learn from that whenever you were doing
play? Yeah, and but with heavy hitters, I think if we're just comparing it to all these sealed formats in Fab competitively, it's probably one of the better ones. Might be the best one competitively, but then I don't want to play this format competitively, so kind of irrelevant. And coming into it, everyone said this isn't a fatigue format, and I do nothing but fatigue people in heavy hitters. I just take all of my like 2-block equipment if I have them. I just put them on my heroes. I don't play like flat trackers unless it's against a guardian or whatever. And then I just like outvalue people. And a lot of games do end up where I just present more number and fatigue somebody through damage. But I don't know. Like, I just made a KO deck almost at all my pre-releases. I 5-0'd the Rabble event. I went 7-1 at the Calling. And all my pre-releases, I went like 21-1 or something. I just like added it up. I went 33-2, and I think all but a couple of those games I fatigued somebody. I don't really understand why people don't get it, but whatever. And like, we don't have a weapon that attacks for 4. A lot of cards block for 2, but like the like 4 block cards and like all the defensive cards you can play just like really warp the format. And this sealed format is way less powerful than the draft format. Like, it's 2 different formats, and this is one of the formats that I felt that like really shined the most. I don't know. It's fine. And I don't think my sealed pool in most of my pools were very good. I had one like really broken Guardian pool during a pre-release, but other than that, every pool I've played has been just absolutely terrible. Like, my Calling pool was not good. I would not wish that upon anybody.
Well, you have a very unique way of looking at the sealed format. But I will say, I thought the games were fun to play. I thought there was a lot of skill expression in the games, in your micro decisions. Obviously, you have to have a deck to come to play with in sealed, and that's kind of like the barrier of entry is like, are you tall enough to ride this ride? Most of the time I'm not, but in this case I was. And I thought overall, I obviously enjoyed the event. I got second, right? Like, I have to jump on a soapbox before we go into some of our questions, though. I am such a salty little boy about like not winning that tournament. Like, you have no idea. Like, last 2 days, I've been so salty. I was so salty after the game. It was like the first time. It's like one of the first times like I lost a tournament. I couldn't like go back and be like, I made a mistake. Like, if you make it to the finals, like the only game that matters is the game that you played in the finals. Like, if you lose your winning in, and this is not a dig at you, Pat, but like if you lose your winning in, you can always think about like, maybe I shouldn't have lost like 2 rounds ago. Like that loss, maybe I shouldn't have lost that one, right? And then I don't have to be in this situation. But like, when you're in the finals, none of your past losses in the tournament are actually relevant anymore. So that excuse doesn't work. All that actually matters is the game in the finals. It's like really weird for people who've never gotten second before. I've gotten second a lot. I've never won a big tournament. But like, none of those other games matter. All that matters is the actual finals match. And like, dude, my luck was terrible. And I think I played that thing like pretty flawless. I would love, if anyone thinks I made a mistake, if you could comment what the mistake was, I will review it and I will comment if that is correct or not. And maybe you will teach me something, which will be sweet. If I learned something that I made a mistake in there, that'd be awesome if I could blame myself instead of random universe luck, right? That is just me being a salty boy. It hasn't sunk in that it's actually a real accomplishment. Like right now, it just kind of feels like, I got second, but it's like not very good. To be fair, I didn't top anything at all last year, and I finally broke the streak. So I will eventually be happy. I know Yuanji said in a couple of months I will be happy and I will be proud of the accomplishment. But currently, right now, getting second just like doesn't feel like anything. Like, I'm more proud of like RTNs that I've won than getting second at this calling right now. But that's just me being like a little salty boy. So feel free to also call me a salty boy in the comments. That's fine. I'm well aware that I am speaking from a privileged position and should not be complaining as much as I am. Which is why the only thing on my Twitter right now is just says unlucky. Like, I didn't make a post recapping anything. I was not in the mind space. I'm like, I should probably censor myself for a couple of days till I can actually talk about it in like a happy way. And Pat knows there's several people that he knows that are like this after they lose tournaments. And it's just how I've always been as well. So that's me on my soapbox about the tournament. Overall, obviously it was awesome. And I'm actually more happy about how many people in Runaways we had potentially in top 8. We had to go through each other to get there because like there was no one else to stand in our way. Like, if we didn't stand in our own way, we were just going to fill all of the slots in the top 8. So we had to stop ourselves. I think all of our prep as a team and talking about everything really paid off at that event. And I think it showed up as well. I mean, we had we had 8 people going in, and we had Connor and Dalton and Craig going into day 2 were also all viable to make it in, and then right going into the last draft, Connor, Naib, myself, Pat, Yuanji, James, I'm forgetting someone, but we all Dalton, we were all live going into the last draft. Like, it was ridiculous how many people we had going. Like, if any of us 3-0, we're all in. And Yuanji was already in because it was easy for him.
Yeah,
he was taking a nap.
I did 3-0.
Yeah.
The second try.
I went up to Yuanji and said, "Hey, can you please 3-0 so that some of us can get in at 3, like at exit 3? I need you to dream crush some people, please."
I tried.
And he did. He succeeded. It was a good team effort. So, okay. Any other thoughts on the calling? I know we have Naib going to Liverpool this weekend to try and run it back, because this time he will not run into me and his winning in, which would be great. So we'll be cheering on Naib again in this format. But any other thoughts before we jump into our questions from the Discord?
I am shocked that Lucas did not win the Battle Hardened. He didn't even top the Battle Hardened.
Yeah.
Washed.
He played Bravo. What did you expect?
Yeah.
To him, the top with the bad deck.
I think Bravo's fine.
You shouldn't just bring a deck that's fine to a tournament. That's just my opinion, I guess.
Well, I mean,
We
I think
learned the
I think Bravo's good, but you have to tech it. I think
For the meta. Yeah.
I think Lucas wasn't teched for Kano, and so I believe he lost to Yuki, and he also lost to Kano.
Did he lose to Majin? Because shout out to Majin for getting second place. Good for him.
Yeah. He's
very
been
impressive.
doing great with Kano.
There were a lot of Kanos running around.
Let's hope that people actually take a second to learn that Kano's a real deck. Donate some sideboard slots to beat this deck so that we can forget about it for a little bit, and hopefully it'll be gone for the Pro Tour.
Yeah, put those Oasis Respites into your deck and put some AB in your deck. It's just a couple of slots just to help you out.
Play the new helmet.
We're not.
Yeah,
We're
play
not
play some Spell Void pieces if you really are scared.
The new helmet's not a joke. You should, if you don't have Arcane Barrier in that spot, you should run the new helmet.
Yeah, the balance helmet is so good against Kano. What are they going to do? Not draw cards?
So, okay, let's jump into our Discord questions. As always, these are asked by our premium members. If you would like to ask questions on the podcast, feel free to join the link below, and you can get your questions asked every week, along with a bunch of other great giveaways, freebies, videos, talking with us, talking with the other people who have signed up for testing. I jump in there from time to time and see people like scheduling meetups with other people who are serious about taking the game to the next level. Just because you don't have people locally doesn't mean you can't make a community of people to practice with. So if interested in any of that or just drafting for free, feel free to join the link below. Okay, enough of my plug. Let's go into some of these questions. So question number 1 is from Dan. Dan is in Disney this week, and that is why he is not on the podcast. And that's why he also wasn't at the calling, because the amount of people who asked me, "Hey, where's Dan? You don't have a lot of people here." And I was like, the only person we don't have here is Dan and like Charles. Like, we have a lot of people here. Just because those two aren't here doesn't mean that most of the team isn't here. I always thought that question was funny. Okay, he asks, what was everyone's favorite moment from calling Hartford weekend?
Oh, I have a good one. So I was talking to Michael Fang near the bathroom when I had finished my round. And I was just like chatting him up. Then Fino and a bunch of his friends were, I think, sitting at a table that was close to me. So I was kind of using him as a gauge to like see like whether or not the round had started. So I was just like talking to Michael. I didn't know that Fino had not was not a part of the tournament anymore. So I walk up to him after my conversation and they're asking me like my record. I'm like, oh, I'm XO. And then they're like, already? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, how did you finish so fast? And so I was I think at that point like 4 minutes late to my round. I sit down. The timer's at 30 minutes. It starts at 35. The judge comes, tells me that I have an IP2 penalty, and it's not fine, but I guess it's fine. Like I appealed. The head judge said no, it's upheld. Okay. I proceed to somehow draw like the magical sequence of cards where I go first. I open my only what is that card that buffs the defense of an attack? I forgot what it's called.
The new
Reinforce the
Stonewall
line?
Confidence.
No,
It's
the instant.
reinforce the line.
Yeah, reinforce the line. So I open a red reinforce the line. I put that in my arsenal, and I'm just like blocking for the first like 2 turns because I have IP penalty. My opponent who's also playing Kayo makes like an agility in my token and puts out this like huge turn. I think it was like 15 or 16 damage, and I'm like, nope, I have this reinforce the line in my arsenal. I ended up taking like 2 or 3 damage total. And then I needed, in addition to that, a combination of him whiffing on Bear Fangs and me just like YOLO drawing into a 2-cost attack so I could go like Wild Ride Claw 2-cost attack. And, everything lined up, and somehow I won the game at 1 through IP penalty.
Better lucky than good.
And you probably did it with like one arm on the table, like real lazy. I don't know if you've ever played against. If you haven't played against Yuanji, it is an experience because he looks like he's trying to take a nap while you're playing the game with him the entire time. Like throws the cards around. It's great. It's a great time. That's why I said it was easy for you. You always look like you're half bored, like you're thinking about something else while you're playing the game. I know you're not. I know you're actually thinking about the game, but the look on your face is just like you're just thinking about what you're going to do after you're done beating this person in front of you.
You can't let them know what you're thinking of that.
Yeah, Yuanji won't even table talk with you. It's ridiculous.
He won't even table talk with us. Like if we play him in the tournament, he won't even talk to us.
Yeah,
he's a stone wall.
No table talk.
He's got that Stonewall confidence.
Ooh.
Yep, it's a good one.
I think that my favorite moment, I guess, obviously besides all the excellent games that we played and the results that were put up, but the game I played against Connor on our team in the second draft where everybody's live for top 8 was probably one of the silliest end finishes to that game, where I had, by all intents and purposes, like lost this game. I was just so dead. But like through a series of magical plays where I had to have a red reinforce the line to dodge a overpowered concuss to like maybe discard a card, and then in like the final stages of the game, winning a clash with a blue trade-in to make an agility token when the opponent revealed a 0 to make an agility token, and then swing Claw for 4 into Pack Hunt, Intimidate your last card, has to hit the 3 block for me to win the game. Like everything, like so many things had to go right for me to win this game, and I was like, this is going to be the game that vaults me up into that 3-0, and it was great, and Connor had played it great. His Betsy deck was amazing, and he, by all intents and purposes, had a better deck. But that's why we love playing Flesh and Blood games like that, where you have these amazing games that finish like crazy like this, and it just reminded me like how much I love it. And props to Connor for doing as well as he did, and I just wanted to make sure I gave him a shout out on that game because it was just so amazingly funny to finish the end of that game. But
funny for you.
I really enjoyed it, and at the time I'm sure he didn't enjoy it, but thinking about it now, I think that he'll enjoy it a little bit later after he reminisces on it a little bit more.
I have 2 short ones because I couldn't think of anything I can say on the podcast. My MVP card of the weekend in both sealed and draft was blue performance bonus, because I would get people to 1 at the end of the game, arsenal it, and be like, you have to give me a full card. Mm-hmm. But like my actual favorite moment was on Friday night. Me and my group went over to Bear's Barbecue, and I just walk in, and one of my friends like runs over to me, and he's just like, hey, you want food? I'm like, I'm in a food place to get food, of course. He just hands me a tray of food, And I was just like, what is this magical Christmas land that I'm in right now? And because they like fucked up his order and just gave him an extra tray of food, so I got a tray of food.
There
And
you go.
food is a love language for me, so if you want to get on my good graces, just hand me some food. So shout out to Kyler for getting me food. But ooh, blue performance bonus, real good. Gotta like really squeeze out all the value of your deck to win. But
Yeah, I mean,
tell us, Cody, what was your favorite moment?
Well, it wasn't the finals, so I'm going to point that out. I'm just going to let everyone know that ahead of time. It's kind of all centered around the same thing. I think my favorite moment is that top 4 game. I'm pretty proud of that game. Like, my mental didn't break. I think I opened in a way that in almost most draft formats, you would just immediately lose the game, like on the spot. You can't Arsenal. You swing 5 going second with your whole hand. Like, it's a 4-card 5, no Arsenal. It's like pretty much over for most cases. I was very proud my mental didn't break at all. I think played that game near flawlessly as well at the end, and that's the only reason I even had close. So I was very happy with my performance there. Outside of it, like every round I would like text my girlfriend. So after I got top 8, I'd be like, hey, I made top 8. And then she like freaks out. And then I'm like, hey, I won my top 8. And then she freaks out again. And then, hey, I won my top 4. And then she just sends me a picture, and on her like, big screen TV, she just has my game playing. She has no idea what the game is going on, but she's even tuning in to watch the game. So that, overall, that's kind of like outside with the whole experience. Like that was probably my favorite, moment of the whole thing. And then I lost, and there was no happy moments left for the rest of the time I was there. Okay, next question. We have, after seeing Brute rise in the meta, what do you think would happen if Ice came back? I will assume that the heroes released in similar power as they are right to now. And this is from Millen. So what do you think would happen if Ice came back? Brute would be bad.
Just I like Ice. I like Ice.
Think that's true.
I realize that some people think that just the existence of Ice frostbites are not a good thing for the game, but if you don't have something putting some of these aggro decks in check, you're going to have some very uninteractive games. So maybe be careful what you wish for, people. If you now are going to see the rise of Kayo and Levia just hammer your face in on every turn of the game for the rest of the game, or have agility tokens and swinging 5-card hands, that's what you now put yourself into whenever you don't have some sort of control element in the game. So I think that it would be fine. Bring it back. I embrace the winter.
I agree.
I don't know. Like, Reiner was always pretty decent into Oldham, I think, when those decks were floating around. Brute is kind of weird where because like their cards are usually like rated around paying 2, you a lot of times just have like extra resource floating around. And then sometimes you get to make use of it, and then your turn is like bananas.
Ooh.
So I think in that way, I think Brute would actually do okay against Ice. I think if anything, Ice is kind of detrimental to some of the Brute counters. Like Azalea hates Ice, and so I think it'd be a good time in the Savage Lands.
I always thought of Reinar as like a Yeti. He just like embraced the ice and just ran through it. So I don't know. I think ice would be good for the game. Dromai would probably get better because then she would actually have a deck she can beat.
Okay, next question here. Based off your previous tier list, what surprised you about the 2 tournaments results? Both the PTI in Manila, and then also the Battle Hardened in Hartford. Also, thoughts on Victor moving forward. Is Bravo just the better Guardian to play? And that is from 2 Drop. So, do we think our tier lists were right?
We didn't talk about Manila, right? So, like that tournament, I think there was like 3 or 4 Phis. Yep. I think there's an Akatsu.
That was a Blitz tournament, right?
No, the PTI event was CC. The Battle Hardened, or the Battle Hardened was.
But the one that Victor won was Blitz.
Yeah. The Battle Hardened was Blitz, but the PTI event, I think there were a lot of Phi decks floating around. I think that the the main reason why fives or like ninjas like doing pretty well is just because there weren't like I think in the US Battle Hardened there was like the second most represented deck was Victor, and I think that Victor playing any like number of his like gold generating block cards just like completely shuts down any ninja opponents. And I don't know. I think our tier list was more or less correct. All the heroes that, like, I don't think any of the C tier heroes that we listed did well. I think I forget where we ended up putting Phi. I think we put him at what, like the bottom of A or the top of B.
I think we put him at B.
Yeah, so I think like all the heroes that were like near the top of B or higher like did pretty well. I think that we all kind of predicted that Dromai wouldn't do so hot, despite what a lot of other people are saying. And I think like the only thing that I'm surprised about was that there wasn't like a dash player that did really well.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I think that deck is still pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty close. As far as an early tier list. Okay, next question here. What do you think the Shadow Brute non-attack action needs to be from the next Monarch set for the story set to be good? This is coming from Matt. So I'm guessing this is asking, what do you think the next Shadow Brute non-attack action card, i.e., like Blood Dripping Frenzy, needs to be in the next part of the Monarch story?
Okay, I didn't get.
Yes.
I didn't get the question
I have.
first. Thank you for
Yes.
I have
some
a
context.
Yes.
I have a good answer.
You
for
have
this.
it already?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he means like what does Brute need in order for Blood Dripping Frenzy to be good, but I know exactly what Shadow Brute needs, and Shadow Brute needs a non-attack action that draws cards and discards them, and if you discard sixes, something happens.
So like a Cast Bones, but straight to your graveyard.
Yeah, like I think one of the biggest issues that Levia has is kind of at the very beginning of the game when you don't have a graveyard, you need to somehow assemble a graveyard. And so I think it'd be really cool if they made a Majestic that, it's just like you play it, you draw like one or two cards, and then you discard a card from your hand. One or two cards from your hand, depending on how many you drew. So it's like card negative, but then if you discard a 6, then it does something.
Ooh,
I can see that.
like that.
I like that.
So you're saying like draw 2, discard 2, and then for every 6 you discarded this way, your next
Make a
attack
token.
is +2.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. The +2 might be a little bit too powerful. It's like a +4.
Yeah,
on
so
on
it could
card.
cost 2, and then you draw 2, discard 2, and then for every 6 you get +2 on your next attack.
You could also like just not give it go again.
No, it has to have go.
No,
that's what I mean, it has to have go again.
It has to have go again.
Yeah, but
But,
who
yeah,
loves
something
action
that-
points?
If Dromai can get a Codex,
Yeah, surely you can
make a
just
Codex for Levia. Levia
You can make
Codex.
it. You can even make it cost 1. You can even make it cost 1.
Yeah. I think costing 1. Yeah, okay. Yeah, costing 1. You draw 2, discard 2, and then you get +2 for each 6 that you discard. I think that'd be a great card.
But you can even make it a yellow. Even make it a yellow.
Yeah.
Okay, next question here is going to be any predictions for how the meta will react to KO? They're going to play it. There you go.
I
you can't beat 'em,
I
join
think that people will be very cognizant as soon as Yuki's list gets posted. They're going to do a lot of testing against it. It's going to be the kind of the standard list to test against, and we will see if people are able to adapt to it, or if people will just say, "Hey, we think this is the best. So we're going to play this." So I know that we've been looking at it already one day in. So
My thoughts is kind of weird. My mind's always on fatigue. Out of the 3 brutes, KO's the only one I feel like you can actually fatigue, and that also might like warp the meta around it, because normally like you play Brute so you can beat Guardian, but if Guardian can somehow, fatigue out or beat out the Kayo, maybe people might lean into the other Brutes because they just went Kayo. I don't know. That one's a little weird.
I personally think that KO can be fatigued.
Yeah, I also do. I've done it.
The Kasai copium is going to be even higher because they think they win that matchup. I don't know. Kasai's dead to me. It's done. I'm just gonna publicly announce it. I think that deck
over.
I think the deck is overrated. I think that it has some completely terrible, unwinnable matchups, and even with the matchups that it's good into, it's just fine. Whatever. I'm done with Kasai. I'm disappointed. I am disappointed.
I agree. I'm so sad. I spent like the last 3 weeks on it. But Dynamos is a messed up card. That's what we learned.
The card is great. The deck is good. It's just fine. Like I said 2 weeks ago, the deck is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lasai.
I was hoping it was going to be the deck I played for the next 6 months, but it shall not be that deck. Okay. Next question here. Any key moments during the calling that benefited you because of your deep level of practice?
Cody made,
and this is by Siphon,
because he drafted like 35 times at least. I think.
Yeah, it was like 24, 25, but yes.
I made sure to bring up Cody's preparation because it was, hey guys, you guys better be drafting this week. It was, and he was making sure our heads were down and making sure we were getting drafts in. And if you guys aren't in the Discord, you guys really should get in there if you have any aspirations to try to draft this set at any competitive level. Drafts are firing all the time. Get in the Runaways Discord if you're not already. And I keep trying to tell everybody, it's a great access tool for just even trying your first ones. But the amount of work that Cody put in, I was just amazing job, Cody. And it clearly showed how much prep you put into the tournament.
I agree.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, let's go to the last question of the day. When drafting, what exactly are you committing to memory? All cards in the pack? All cards in pack 1? Just bombs? And then also for gameplay, do you have perfect knowledge of both pitch stacks? This is from Julian. So what are you memorizing when you're drafting?
I want to see Jimmy's answer. He's excited.
Yeah. Jimmy's the master of memory.
So
of counter pitch stacking, right? The counter pitch stack.
Oh, I love counter pitch stacking, but like, let's go from the top. So like when drafting, I look at the first pack, and usually the first thing I look at is like, similar to Yuanji, like all the cards that could send a signal that are like bombs. And I tend to lean towards whatever has the least amount of one class. So if there's like 5 good warrior cards and 1 brute card, I'll take the brute card and let everyone else have the warrior cards. And then the other thing I'm looking in that is like, okay, if I take this brute card, what do I think I'm going to get back? And then like each pack I get after that, I care a little bit less and less. Like pack 2, I'm just like, I don't care what the person to my left is drafting. I'm just going to take whatever is best for me and maybe just try to wheel something. But the draft that Cody and I were in, the second round of drafting, we were like in pod 3 or something. That was one of the like best draft portions I've ever had in a rated event ever. I ended up at the end of pack 2, I had 27 playables in my deck and 1 equipment, which was my headpiece. So my deck was already done, and I managed to wheel every single card that I wanted. And I was like, what is going on? Is this real life? And then pack 3, I did the no and hate drafted Hot Streak, which is just, yeah, I took this Hot Streak right from you, Cody, and
didn't even need it.
He didn't need it.
Yeah, he didn't even need it. And oh man, I ended up having like 41 cards for my deck, and that was the only one I didn't have. Oh man,
that draft was amazing.
Yeah,
I was aggressively wheeling everything I wanted. I'm like, you know what? I bet I could wheel this, and I was like, let's see it. And then it came back around, and I'm like,
Yeah, I
Let's
kept
go.
I kept taking the generic out of the pack, and I was like, I'll get my Guardian card back. Okay. And then like in an actual draft game, if I think the game could ever go to fatigue, I'm just very concerned about what I'm pitching and the order I'm pitching them. And just the moment I hit second cycle, I'm just like watching my opponent's stack, especially in this format. If they have like no blocks or something down there, I'm just waiting until they like have the no block in their hand so I can just kill them. And if you can do that, you have like a huge advantage over your opponents. And I think that's where I got a huge edge to answer the last question in sealed. Because I would just wait for all my brute opponents to like draw their wild ride, and I'd be like, okay, you're dead.
Yeah. Anytime I see my opponent pitch a power card or red card, anytime there's like, the light, the flashlights go off, and you're like, oh, that card's not supposed to be in the pitch stack. That's supposed to be being played at me. That's when I'm starting to like watch out and be like, okay, how many cards are in your deck now? How many more hands roughly is it going to be for until that card enters your hand again? That was huge in Bright Lights whenever you were tracking like overpower cards, and you're like, okay, I got to make sure I have my block card in my hand whenever that card comes back. Those are the things that I think that I'm watching, and then I usually I like to say I'm good at it. Sometimes I'm not good at it of keeping track of my own stack, but normally I'm just kind of watching to see when the power cards come back from my opponent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat. When I'm drafting, I'm only looking at what's going to wheel, and I really only really care about tracking it on pack 1. So on pack 1, I will take my card and go, okay, what do I think I'm going to wheel in this pack? And then I send it, and then when the pack comes back around, I go, am I correct? Did I wheel the cards I thought I was going to, and how many are left? So if there's like 3 warrior cards, I take one, I pass around 1 warrior card. Good chance that they're like 1 warrior, unless they're like right next to me and they took like a 3 for 7 or something. Right? So I'm like, 1 warrior. If it comes back and there's no warrior cards in that pack, then I knew there was 2 and other stuff people would want. I go, oh no, that might be a problem, right? But you can also tell like what wheels. So like if I send like a red and a blue, it comes back around and like I get the red and I'm like, oh, I take blue. Like that's fine. Like I know that my chances of wheeling blues are a lot lower in pack 3 because my other warrior person did not take a blue, right? They took a red. And so like that's like the really like in-depth stuff that you can like pick up on. So then you know what you can wheel and can't wheel in future packs. And that's all I'm doing in pack 1. Pack 1, I'm just picking stuff from my deck and I'm just seeing what wheels so that I can aggressively try and wheel stuff in pack 2 and 3, so that I can be like really greedy with my picks in the first cycle around. And like in our pack, James, like there was another warrior and there was 2 gloves that came around, and the first gloves went around and I'm like, I'm not picking this up no matter what. I'm pretty sure they're going to grab it. And then the other gloves I saw was going to get back to me last pick. It'd be the last pick in the pack. And I said, I'm gonna wheel this shit. And I spent it around and it came back as my last pick was my 2 black gloves. And I was like,
so
in that moment when you call it and it happens, you're just like, yes, I'm a god.
It feels so good. I had a very similar moment where I did that at Bright Lights draft, and I said the words "I'm a god." I said those exact words. I think it was like a yellow backup protocol that like made my deck so insane. And I was like, "It's gonna be the last pick. I know it. I promise."
Yeah, and so like that's what I'm doing in draft most of the time, and you got to track what gets picked up and what doesn't come back in the pack so that you know how aggressive you can be in pack 2 and 3, and like how important those early picks are. And then in the actual games, most of the time, I know the pitch stack depends on what I'm in tune with or if it's relevant. Again, I typically track cards that are relevant, and I do this even at like locals. But it's almost second nature because of chain stacking. It became like really common. Most of the time, I don't have like I'm not going to be like, hey, it's 12 from the bottom and it's this exact card. But what I know is it's like in 4 hands they're going to have that card that I memorized for them to have. You know, somewhere in that range they're going to have it, and that's like most of what I do. If it's a really intense match. Or if the pitching is highly relevant, then counting their deck and doing it officially is like the right way to do it. But you can only really do that when you're not timed and the match is going to call for it. But most of the time you just need to keep an idea. Oh, second cycle, they're going to have, a fatal engagement. I need to realize they're going to have a fatal engagement when that comes back around. And that's really what you're doing. Yuanji, anything different for you? What do you do? You're like a madman with drafts, so.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a lot of other stuff that I'm tracking during the draft. I use like pack 1 and 2 to like kind of figure how many of each hero there are. So I like each pack, I'm basically like counting how many cards there are for each class or hero, and then based off of what I see coming back around, I like adjust my numbers for like what I think, like how many people are in each. I try to have, I don't like count exactly, but I have like a sense for around how much the packs are skewed towards blues or towards reds, because usually like the packs that are open aren't they're not like evenly distributed, reds or blues, at like a certain point in the draft. So I'll like adjust my picks based off of that. And then the other thing is like for equipments, I'll try to keep track of like which equipments have gone around. And like the only thing that like keeping track of like exact numbers of all the heroes that are in the draft, the only difference that makes is you might like shift your pick order a little bit. So like if I know, for example, that it's like a 2 warrior draft, right? And I might pick the Blade Break 2 Vigor chest a little bit higher, just because I know that like that card normally isn't very good, but you know, a lot of the better warrior decks can make Vigor quite easily. And so, you know, that card is going to go up significantly in value. So it's usually stuff like that. And I don't really track my pitch much at all during the game. I'm cognizant of the cards that I'm pitching to the bottom, so I try to like not leave myself with just like fumes at the end of the game, but I try to just like focus most of the time on, you know, like making sure that each turn I play like as efficiently as possible. The only exception is when my opponent pitches, like you said, like if my opponent pitches like a yellow fatal engagement, I'm like, whoa, I gotta look out for that in the future.
Exactly. I love it when your opponent, they have like 2 reds, or they have like a red and a yellow, and they like put them together and put them down in the pitch. And I'm always over there spreading their cards. Like, no. I need to see exactly what you're pitching. See that all the time where people are just like, they just clump all the cards together, or when they block, they put all the
blocks.
They block, they put all the cards on top of each other, and I'm like, are you trying to get a tell out of me if I'm searching for attacks when you block to see like what I have? Because like it was like only a thing this weekend. It's not something I've dealt with in CC much. People just put their cards out in CC most of the time, but like this weekend, I only played Warrior like the whole entire tournament, so I kept having people who would just put all of their cards in a pile as their block, so I couldn't see like what the card type was. I don't know if they were doing it on purpose or not, but it was weird because I had to keep spreading their cards out to see if I was going to use a reaction or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that as well. I'm often also looking at what your opponent is blocking with too. So like if you stick it up in a pile, like it's much harder to like see what they are and get any inferences about like with their hand, because like whenever you're doing that, that's how I'm often engaging. If I have to make a decision, like, you know, that's questionable, seeing what they blocked with can give you a lot of information about their hand.
Something I really like to do. So most people do not track their own pitch, let alone their opponent's pitch. So I really like to mess with people, and I'm like, I'll pitch a lunging press, and most people won't even notice, and I will say I am pitching a lunging press, and then they'll get to the end of the game and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, you have a lunging press. I should probably play around that." And I'm like, "Well, I gotcha."
Psychic damage.
Well, that is a great way to end the podcast, I think. So thanks everyone for joining us. Take care. I got to go be a salty boy. So goodbye, everybody. See ya.
See ya.
Goodbye.
7
What
envelope
we could do
in
here is go
darkness.
ahead and play the envelope.
All 3 pitches of Envelope in Darkness.